Welcome to Challenging Climate, a bi-weekly podcast that aims to tackle the real issues at stake in the contemporary climate debate. The fact is, no one serious questions whether climate change is happening. The debate has moved on. But deep questions remain about how we should respond to this crisis, and reasonable people can and will strongly disagree. I'm Pete Irvine, a climate scientist, and together with Jesse Reynolds, an environmental policy expert, we'll have conversations with a wide range of guests with unique perspectives and deep expertise on climate change. The fact is, climate change is such a multifaceted and complex problem that no one has the one true take on this issue. But by exposing ourselves and you to the views of a wide range of experts, we hope that you can develop a well-rounded understanding of this issue on which you can build informed opinions.
Our motivation for launching a podcast on climate change is that it's arguably the world's most challenging problem. And I think that that's because the political incentives for action are so poorly aligned. It's clearly in the interest of the whole world to aggressively reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But each country would like to do as little of the hard and expensive work as possible. And the logical outcome is that not enough happens. Politics between industrialized and developing countries are also difficult. They have very different histories and expected futures of greenhouse gas emissions, and they face very different risks of climate change. There's also difficult politics within countries. Some economic sectors might be left behind, and that runs the risk of further fueling populism. And I think that what's happened is that there's been a sense that those of us who want to see more climate action must exude a type of an optimism that we can do this because we must do this. And there's been a reluctance to investigate some of the more real but difficult questions. For example, climate action is often politically popular in the abstract, but specific policies to cut emissions, such as carbon taxes, are often politically unpopular. How can we advance climate action under those circumstances in democracies? Is cutting greenhouse gas emissions sometimes in tension with economic development? Current scenarios for keeping greenhouse gas emissions low enough so that we stay within our targets for global warming rely on the removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere at enormous scales. Is it wise to rely on such future technological developments? These are the tough issues that we'll look into in Challenging Climate.
I think it's also important to recognize that as well as being politically challenging, the climate problem is technically challenging to understand. I mean, we rely on climate models that are incredibly complex, incredibly capable, but have real limitations, and there's deep uncertainties in their projections of future climate change. The same is true of the economic models that weigh the costs of action against the impacts of climate change. Again, these are complex, but they also necessarily make assumptions with real ethical implications about how much we should weigh the interests of the future against the interests of the present. There are difficult policy and technical questions around climate change that we don't know the answer to. But we hope by speaking to our wide range of guests that we're going to get closer to an understanding, and so will you.
Challenging Climate will launch on January 11th with new episodes every 2 weeks after that. We have our first guest lined up. We'll start with Neal Stephenson, science fiction author whose new book, Termination Shock, explores the political fallout of solar geoengineering. After that will be Holly Buck on why and how the world should end the use of fossil fuels. And third will be Roger Pielka Jr., who will discuss how advocates for climate action can become disconnected from the scientific consensus. So subscribe now to Challenging Climate.